Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on this beautiful last day of January. I have with me today one of my colleagues, Chris, who's going to take over for me partway through. And I have Jerry Bezner on the line. Jerry is our Director for Tower and Accessory Sales, and Jerry has been in the tower industry for a long time. I'll let him explain his background. This webinar is really truly focused on off-the-shelf towers. We're not really focusing on any particular brand. It's really about how to choose what tower and what you can use them for. A couple of housekeeping things. The first thing is we are recording the webinar, so we intend to send it out as soon as we can. We'll send a link to a YouTube link that you can use to watch it as much as you want, and you can share it. Second thing is that if you'd like a copy of the presentation, you can just reply to the email. We'll send out a link, the email after the webinar. And then the third thing is if you have questions, we'd prefer for you to ask them as we go along. So you can just use the chat on the system there to ask your questions. And we will try to address them as we can going throughout the presentation. And if we aren't able to get to them, we'll save them for the end or maybe answer them after the webinar. So I think that's maybe it. Everyone's going to be on mute throughout the webinar, so you won't be able to talk to us, but you can just use the chat if you have any issues or things like that. So without, I think that's about it. I'm going to hand things over to Jerry.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm glad you didn't tell them how many gray hair I have because I've been in the wireless industry almost since it began, initially starting many years ago, two-way radio communications, which required towers to make those networks work, and building cellular towers. And for the last 6 years with Alliance as their Director of Tower and Accessory Sales. And prior to that, for 15 years with Trylon, which is a Canadian manufacturer of towers. So my background is heavily involved in towers. And what I'd like to do in a presentation today is try to convey as much information as possible to everybody who's on the call. I do have to say that the presentation, because of the nature of people on the call, we have close to 50 people on the call. Right across Canada and right across the United States. We have people listening in that are, part of carriers, radio dealers, some broadband operators. So there's a lot of applications for towers and a lot of need for wireless communications. And so my presentation today will cover product lines that are available in the marketplace, try to compare certain products, but really more or less just act as an introduction to off-the-shelf towers, or what we really mean by pre-engineered towers for faster delivery, and convey some of that information to everybody. So don't hesitate during the session. I prefer normally being in front of people, so I'd like to see questions pop up that I may be able to address. Otherwise, we'll go through the presentation as quickly as we can here as well. So, the thing that most people would like to do, especially I found over the years, people who are building new wireless networks, they would really like to have a skyhook up there because particularly WISP, they get very involved in the technology and many people, and then at the end they realize they need height. Well, radio communications, RF requires height, and unfortunately there's no skyhooks up there that are easily accessible. At one time people thought the satellite communications was going to take over from all terrestrial communications, but it hasn't worked that way. So, people are very innovative how to get height. So at one time to get your cell phone working, you got to get up there a little higher. And here's a girl who's found a way of getting a little higher. Now in building RF communication systems, the easiest thing to do many years ago was, hey, there's a barn that's up in that field, and there may be a water tower nearby, so what do we have to do to put up an antenna on there? And if the barn doesn't fall down, maybe that's a good place. Sometimes people put it on trees, but trees grow and they distort, and that doesn't work too well. So You know, many times the fast solutions, the low-cost solutions don't work. In some cases they work, in some cases they work as a temporary basis. So why do we need a tower? So as I'm saying, you know, wireless networks need height. It's pretty hard to build a wireless network without height. Even if you start doing communications underground, there's other technologies that are involved in doing that. But above ground, line of sight is important. What is the coverage requirement? If you're heavily surrounded by trees, you have to get above the tree line. You know, and there's ways of doing that, but really when it gets down to it, most people at the end of the day have to put up in a tower of sorts. So really when you start saying a tower, you know, there's something that goes onto that tower. A tower is the last thing anybody wants to buy. And so the question is, what really goes on the tower? So when building that wireless network, you'll see that you need antennas. You may need microwave dishes, and there's a lot of other products that go on the tower depending upon the sophistication of what you're trying to do at the time. So this picture here shows a pretty robust tower with some pretty robust dishes. You know, microwave dishes could be 8 feet or they could be 1 foot, and there you could have a small Yagi on top of the tower. So there's other products that go on the tower as well. And at Alliance here, as my title said, I'm involved with towers and accessories are an important part of what goes on the tower that helps build your network. It doesn't all become wireless. The wireless part is what you're building. It's not going from the ground to the top of the tower as yet to get that communication. So here you see a wide assortment of various products that go on the tower to help build the wireless communications network that you're trying to achieve. And with that as well, which is a load on the tower, which is an important part of understanding what your tower is cable. Now, this is pretty robust cable that I put up there just to indicate what size. This is the composite cable that has the coax and also has fiber going up the tower. So needless to say, the more runs of cable going up the tower, the bigger the cable, the more robust the tower has to be. And some of those factors will get involved in looking at that in the next few minutes as well, as to how you actually select the right tower for your application. So looking at that, towers. So there's a lot of different towers, and people sometimes get confused as what we are talking about. So in the communications area, there's lattice self-support towers. Sometimes people just refer to them as a self-support tower. So a lot of people refer to them as a mast. What's the mast that you're looking at putting up? And then there's guide towers. And guide towers, you know, this is a picture of a pretty big guide tower. It's not quite considered an off-the-shelf tower. And similar with monopoles, you know, the monopoles are another form of getting height. Micropoles are another, tripoles are another. There's a lot of structures out there that get you height. And the question that people ask me a lot of time is, you know, why would one choose one structure over another structure? So first of all, most people who are building a wireless network want to do it at the most cost-effective price. And generally speaking, the most cost-effective structure is a guide tower. However, the guide tower requires land, and land becomes an expense. The guide wires normally go about 70% out of the height of the tower. So if the tower is 100 feet, you have 3 guide points around 70 feet, and that becomes an expense. So the next least expensive tower is really a lattice self-support tower. And from there, you go to a monopole and tripoles and disguised structures as well. And as you go up that chain, the cost of getting your height keeps on going up. And that all depends on what you're trying to do in building your wireless network. But most people that we're talking to about off-the-shelf towers, pre-engineered towers, we're talking about smaller towers that achieve the purpose of what the person would like to accomplish. Then, you know, there's a break point between what is a custom tower and what is a stock tower or pre-engineered tower. Generally speaking, a stock tower really started off that way. It's there, it's in our warehouse, and Alliance carries certain models of towers off the shelf, which we could ship within a day, or we could ship within 3 days, depending upon the requirement, and it could go through a little bit of that as well. But a cellular tower is usually a big custom tower, and as you choose tower requirements, the more steel you put in a tower, the more cost that tower is. So stock tower, getting delivery is usually important. Getting a cost point is important, but it's not generally as competitive as a custom tower, where the big carriers, the cellular carriers, may go out to 3 to 5 different tower companies and solicit quotes. Back in the heyday, there was like 15 tower manufacturers, and they would solicit quotes. And these towers would be engineer design, which we'll talk about, but getting it down to meeting the requirement, the most cost-effective way would usually win you the business. While stock towers tend to be need to get it to the market to build your wireless network is really an important factor. So when we talk about factors in building or selecting towers, it really becomes more of selection. There's several criteria. There's survival that says, hey, no additional safety factors. However, when you get a survival tower, it has no ability to get a PE stamp in the state or PN stamp in Canada. They're not available to that. And because there are no additional safety factors, if you get a major storm, that tower may collapse. It may collapse at the base, it may collapse near the top or in the middle or wherever the weakest point of that tower is, that tower may collapse. In Canada, towers are designed to a standard called CSA S37-13. And in the States, they're designed to TIA, EIA Rev 222, and there's several revs to that as well, F, G, and now H. And the H is very much approaching the Canadian standard as well. And that takes into consider wind events that could be every 30 to 50 years. And because of the major storms that we're seeing everywhere in the globe, most people are looking at least a 50-year wind event in determining what the wind load, wind pressure off that structure should hold. So in that, you get the tower designed to that specification. You also could get the foundation designed. So when you get the foundation designed, you require what's called a geotechnical soils report. And this is where you get borings at the site specific to where the tower is going to go to know what the ability for that soil, what the conditions are to support those particular tower requirements. And in the States, they have a pretty good wind report system that's readily available, and most of the major tower companies that manufacture towers have access to very specific wind areas, and getting it from, as in Canada, from the government is not really a requirement. And in the States and in Canada, the requirement for stamping requires a professional engineer with a license in the state or province to say that tower has been designed to the specific specifications, but also to the specific load that's going on that tower and to the specific area and the requirement associated with that. So, as I indicated, but you got to get more specific. So the specifics are, you know, what are the antennas that will be going onto the tower? And almost equally as important is the location of the antenna. So if you're putting a microwave dish, a 4-foot dish at the top of the tower, it's significantly different than putting it halfway down the tower. So the elevation of the tower is really determined by your propagation requirements. And that's where a lot of times people come to me and say, I just need a tall tower. And I say, you know, you got to go back and look at what are you trying to do? What is the propagation characteristics that you're trying to achieve? Then determine the height of your tower Then we determine what's going on that tower with respect to the antennas, the location of the antennas, the types of transmission line, where the tower is going to be located, so that we're able to access the location, because the longitude and latitude, which is really preferred and a lot easier to get these days with GSP than years ago, is really the best way of identifying the location. You know, saying it's in the town of Toronto or Chicago or this street or that street, you know, the wind velocity, pressure really depends on the elevation above ground level as well. So if you're in an area where all of a sudden there's a mountain and you want to go up on the mountaintop, that location is going to have a lot more wind than at the bottom. The same thing applies, you know, we'll talk a little bit about that, as roof structures. So if you're on a 3-story building, the wind is totally different than if you're on a 30-story building. So those factors are important, and it's just as important in determining the tower selection as well as on a roof. So the other factor that plays, depending upon where you are in the country, is ice. And ice factor could be very minimal ice, or it could be a lot of ice, and that loads down the tower as well.
Jerry, I've just got one question.
Yeah.
And we can, the question is, who uses survival design? Is it regulated to use survival tower in Canada?
Okay, there are, the tower that is available particularly in Canada and in the United States is the Titan Tower, manufactured by Trylon. That tower has been in the marketplace for over 30 years and is still being sold mostly in rural areas. So if you're in a rural area and the municipality is not concerned about that tower collapsing, it's on your farm, you're putting up a network for GPS to control what you're doing on your farm, and all you need is heights up to 96 feet, and the load is very, very minimal, you could put up a survival tower. So survival towers are still being sold. It's a nice, fast way. It's a low-cost way of getting a structure in place that is not mission critical. You know, if it's a critical operation, police, fire, even WISPs, though WISPs used to go with a lot of Titan towers because they're very economic to put up initially, but if they start getting doctors on the network, then they have to go with a more robust type tower to ensure it doesn't come down in times of emergency.
Okay, thanks, Jerry.
Yeah, so we have a questionnaire that starts telling you know, a little bit more information, what's required associated with it. You know, it's very simple overall. It's basically the things that I stated, you know, who you are, where's the site information, what's the application as a general, you know, guideline. And we also have access to some of the biggest brands of towers. So we sell Rohn, we sell Sabre, we sell Trylon, and other products as well. And as you'll see as I go through the presentation, there ends up being a lot of similarity between the various towers. So once the tower requirement is specified, you know, one of the other major factors is the cost of freight. So choosing a vendor, a supplier, or a product that's closer to the end market may save a lot of money, and in many cases, you'll see that's the best solution versus a specific brand, and having access and knowledge of multiple brands helps the solution there as well. So basically, once we get that tower questionnaire completed, then you know, we look to see what tower meets the requirement best. Is it a Trylon tower, a Sabre tower, a Rohn tower, Way tower, taking into consideration what I just said. And for custom towers, really, we occasionally get involved in very small custom towers, but really the national and regional fabricators are the way to go on those, because as I indicated earlier, it becomes a very competitive situation, and custom towers, you're normally looking at lead time 6 to 12 weeks, Well, off-the-shelf towers, you're looking at next day, which the Titan tower could be, or you're in a Super Titan, or the Sabre LDA tower, Rohn towers as well could be off the shelf, but usually speaking, they're a little longer.
Jerry, sorry, one more question related to survivability. Is there any legality around climbing the non-CSA and survival-rated towers?
Yes, different jurisdictions in the country, in the province and states, have different requirements. You know, there are several factors involved from a safety point of view. NATE has a certain standard in Canada, STAC, which is something very similar to NATE, define the requirements. OSHA, you know, there are some standards, and it varies across the country. A lot of people would put up a survival tower, which could be, you know, 64 feet in 8-foot increments to 96 feet, and say they'll never climb the tower. If they have to go up there, they'll get a cherry picker and they'll avoid climbing the tower. Other jurisdictions are very, very stringent. In Canada, you know, in Alberta, they have very stringent requirements with respect to the ability of towers to withstand certain tests. Fall arrest tests are becoming more and more difficult as well. The building safety climb systems, either cable or rail, with respect to people falling down as well. So there are standards, and it does vary depending upon where you are. And a lot of people will say they just won't climb the tower.
Okay, thank you.
So what I'd like to do now is to try to get to other than saying towers are similar or what it is to go through certain tower models and give you an idea of what's out there and where stock towers fit in. So on Trylon, you know, I mentioned the Titan tower just a few minutes ago. The tower has been in the marketplace for over 30 years, over 50,000 of them in market in both Canada and the United States. A beefier tower is the Super Titan Knockdown, Super Titan Max. And I'm going to go through these towers in a little bit more detail as we go through the presentation this afternoon as well. Sabre, you know, they similarly have a wide range of towers. Rohn does as well, self-support towers, guy towers, masts as well for a lower cost of getting high rooftops, tapered poles as well. So there's a lot, and as you get through the various manufacturers, they all come very close to offering similar towers. Not too many other companies other than Trylon offer a survival tower, which is a Titan tower, which could go up to 96 feet. So this tower is built in 8-foot sections, and it's made out of pre-galvanizing sheeting versus pretty well all the other towers in the marketplace are going to be hot dip galvanized towers, which are more structurally stronger, but way more expensive as well. So this tower is that survival tower we just talked about. It has no ability to be stamped. The picture that you're looking at there is one of a 96-foot assembled tower. So it's assembled in the 8-foot sections, but then the installer has to stack that tower as well. So there's costs associated with that. There's accessories, and I'm not going to go through all the accessories, but just tell you every tower has a full line of accessories, and the accessories are also very specific to the tower, very specific to the wind, the ice rating associated with it, and even the weight of the various antennas that are going on there. The next tower up from the Titan and the Trylon line is the Super Titan Knockdown. And that tower could also be assembled, but usually only assembled in the factory in 10-foot sections up to 120 feet or 12 sections, the bottom sections. Above that, you have to get that tower in knockdown form. And this tower is made capability of going up to 190 feet. But the things with towers, and they're sort of building blocks, it's like a Lego set. You know, if you don't need a lot of load, you could take the top sections of the tower and build a tower with, say, the top 10 sections of this tower, which could be 100 feet, or you could take the bottom 10 sections and have a very robust tower at 100 feet, or take various sections along the way. And that's the same thing with the Titan and just about every other tower manufacturer as well, to some extent, because ultimately the towers have to be fixed at the top and secured at the bottom with a foundation. So this tower has the ability to be CSA or EA compliant. Now, just because the tower has that capability does not mean it is. It has to be analyzed by an engineer in the state, the province where it's going, based on the factors that I said. So you could take a tower that has the capability of being designed to an EIA CSA spec, but does not meet the loading requirements and cannot be certified accordingly. So that is where a lot of people seem to get confused. They say, well, that's a certifiable tower, so that's what I want to buy. But it's not if you don't have all those parameters defined, where exactly the site is, all the information that I've been talking about. Those factors are critical before an engineer anywhere in Canada, the United States, will certify that tower to be meeting those requirements. Every tower out there requires some sort of a foundation in place. And here, there's a lot of variables that go into choosing the foundation. And that a lot of times is determined by the geotechnical report. If you're on a rock foundation, if you're on a sandy soil, the foundations have to change. And so foundations are an integral part of a tower. In some places of the country, you need to put piles in, weld the base section onto the piles. So there's a little bit of work that's required in determining the type of foundation. However, the majority of towers going into good soil conditions are just, as I said, easy to install. When you have a tower, you need a climbing surface. And that came up with the question earlier on, being a survival tower. So this is pictures of step pegs. A lot of this is the least expensive way of getting a climbing surface into a tower. A lot of people, and particularly in the Canadian market, like climbing ladders, and instead of a cable system, which is on the far right-hand side, they like a rail safety climb system, believing that it keeps the climber closer into the tower and allows them to rest. All climbing devices are to climb, they're not work positioning devices. Anywhere safety is a factor, and it's to help you get up the tower, down the tower. When you work, you have to tie yourself off accordingly. So applications are plentiful. I started to talk about, emergency services, SCADA services, broadband services. There's ongoing applications for towers, and the towers have to be selected based on the factors I was indicating. When you get into bigger towers, Trylon offers their Super Titan Max. Now this tower, you say, well, is that really an off-the-shelf tower because it's manufactured in 19-foot sections? It could go up to 251. The reason it's classified back into the off-the-shelf category is that it's totally pre-engineered. All the drawings are available, and the lead time to get a quote is usually a couple of days, and the lead time to get the tower out is usually no more than 2 to 3 weeks. And therefore, it's still classified as a fast service tower versus a custom designed cellular tower, which could take 2 to 4 weeks for the engineering to be done, and then another 4 to 6 or 8 weeks, depending upon the factory load for a custom tower to be delivered. This tower, like the Super Titan, could be PE stamped, PN stamped as well. And then for faster installation applications, most companies have an all-weld form of tower. So here from Trylon is a Super Titan all-weld. This tower goes up to 150 feet, but there again, it's building blocks. So if you need a 100-foot tower, depending upon the load requirement of that tower, you could take the top sections, the middle sections, the bottom section, and the tower itself ends up being a little bit more costly, but there's installation factors that are really saving money as well. And the same thing when we look at the Super Titan Max, which was 19-foot sections, versus the Super Titan Knockdown, which is 10-foot sections. The advantage of the Max in many cases, because there's bigger sections, there's less hardware, faster install than building a, say, 140-foot Super Titan that'll give you the same amount of capacity, but takes longer and more costly to install. The all-weld towers usually have a climbing face built into the tower, so there's no need for step pegs or a climbing ladder. It's usually built right into the face of the tower, and then you could actually climb that tower on all three faces, but usually you would climb it as to where you put one of your fall arrest systems. So some of the advantages of an all-weld tower is it's really easy to put together, it's less parts, it eliminates the ladder, the transmission line supports, but where the trade-off takes place is now when you're shipping this tower from a freight point of view, you're incurring more cost. So now you're getting cost associated with shipping air. It takes more room on a flatbed to get the tower from point A to point B. Then getting into another form of tower is guide towers. So when you look at a guide tower, Trylon offers the STG. It could be a guide tower. Smaller self-support towers are there. Bracketed towers are there as well from this product. This product is all welded together, bolted together, and it has solid round legs. And that, as I get into some of the other products, I'll point out some of the structural differences between one tower manufactured by one company and another by another company. And when we get there, I'll tell you some of the advantages or potential disadvantages. So this STG is all solid round, eliminates the potential internal corrosion inside a member, is very durable, easy to transport in 10-foot sections, bolt together with 3 bolts. So it has an internal climbing face. It's non-tapered. It goes up straight. It's been in the marketplace for at least 20 years now as well, and it's a good tower. And then there's rooftops, and I'm not really going to go into a lot on rooftops today because getting into that is a whole separate discussion that could be a webinar by itself. There's a lot of different products out there. However, the only thing I just want to say about rooftops is a cautionary note. It's not easy to just go on anybody's roof. You could get up there, but if you cause damage to the roof, you may have a serious problem. So always be cautious as to when you want to go on a roof, what the roof is consisting of, if you need to get an architectural approval associated with that. Fall arrests are really important. Alliance is a member of NATE, a member in Canada, STAC. I've been involved with NATE for over 20 years, and STAC since it started in Canada the last 3 years. And I highly recommend, in all cases, everybody follow the guidelines of these associations, of the government standards. The highest fatality and injury rate, unfortunately, is in the tower industry, particularly in the United States. And so attention to safety is really, really important. So now, I went through a lot of towers on the Trylon side, and I just want to go through a few on the Sabre side now as well. So Sabre offers the LDA tower up to 150 feet. This tower is very similar to Trylon's Super Titan Knockdown. The Super Titan Knockdown from Trylon could go up to 190 feet, but generally not sold at that level but usually up to 120, 130 feet, which the LDA tower as well meets those requirements. The design of that tower is very similar. They're both angled legs with angle bracing and considered to be lightweight towers, and being sold, really a lot of them by distribution both in Canada and the United States. A very reliable tower, very similar, and there I would say the choice between this one and Trylon and Rohn, which offers a very similar tower, you'll see, is really your location and cost of freight getting it to you, or familiarity with the tower itself. Then in the Sabre line, going up the channel of bigger towers, they have their S3TL series UL self-support tower. This combines all weld sections with solid round legs, some tubular legs, angle bracing sections. Now, the question that people ask, is there really a difference in the quality of the tower, the longevity of the tower, off the type of material it's made from? And the reality is, if you're going to have an engineered tower stamped by an engineer, that tower, be it a Trylon, Rohn, Sabre, is going to meet that application. So it becomes, at that time, it becomes what's the cost point, what's the cost of freight, the ability of the installer to put it up. The only difference between tubular, solid round, and angle bracing is preference. In Canada, there's a strong preference for angled leg towers. They're not as efficient as a round member tower, meaning in the design of the tower, but there's the ability to always see if there's any corrosion. Years and years ago, when galvanizing process and bass weren't as good as they are now, there's always the concern, will the galvanizing go in a tube, in the tube legs, and properly coat and avoid corrosion off that pipe. In the United States particularly, there is a lot of tube towers. Rohn, which has been one of the biggest manufacturers, predominantly uses a lot of tube legs. There's a lot of that out there, and those towers have done exceptionally well and still work very, very well as well. So that's kind of where you start seeing a mix as different companies, in order to get cost competitive, kind of use different technologies, different material to make sure their tower, first of all, meets the engineering standard they're designed for, and try to do that at the most cost-effective way and manner to get to that point. And then Sabre, in their self-support area, has what they call their S3TL series VL, goes up to 240 feet. This is now tubular legs and angle bracing sections. So it's a combination, as you just saw, and is a combination of what makes the most cost-effective quality tower for that particular company. Looking at one of the very successful products from Sabre is their 1800 series tower. This is very, very similar to the STG, which is also an 18-inch face tower, very similar in capacity and design, and ability to be used as a short tower, as a self-support, 50, 60 feet, bracketed to a house or building, or as a guide tower. So very similar there, very similar to Rohn towers, the 55, 65G series as well. So now here we have Rohn, which similarly has a lot of self-support towers, guide towers. They do really well in telescoping mass rooftops, tapered poles. So when we look at Rohn, their G series structure, they dominate what's called the 25G, which is a 10-foot, very lightweight tower, goes up in 10-foot sections, good for 10 foot to 60 feet, depending on the wind location. Moving up from the 25G, there's a 45G, 55, 65. So they have a whole series of products that are really guide design, but ability to be bracketed and in small capacities as a self-supporting tower. So in the bigger combinations, like the 5565, it's like the Trylon SDG, the Sabre 1800. And there again, proximity to market, what your requirement is, will help determine which of these products are required. Rohn on the self-support tower offers the RSL, where that particular tower, the design is very similar again to the Trylon super tight knockdown, the LDA tower from Sabre. However, they only make it available from 20 feet to 100 feet. They haven't designed it for more higher applications or sturdier applications from that. But then they do offer the SSV tower, and they have another whole range of products to get into more custom towers as well. So the guide tower, as I said earlier, big guide towers as well, which could be also very fast designed from off-the-shelf requirements. Telescoping masts, 20 feet to 50 feet. You know, this has been for very low cost. Let's get something up in the market. Usually not really designed for any type of antenna load. Some of these telescopic masts can also be guided down to give you a little bit more sturdiness to it. A full range of non-penetrating roof mounts, penetrating roof mounts, wall mounts. And similarly, from all the other manufacturers, we have the ability to provide those types of products. And they vary a little bit, and they vary based on what the actual requirement is. Rohn similarly offers a lot of different poles, embedded poles, monopoles, and full custom design ones. So when we say off-the-shelf towers, there are some that are truly off-the-shelf, but more indicative to where as a distributor like Alliance gets involved is for fast delivery, meeting combination of requirements that are not fully cellular tower, heavy load tower requirements. So that's kind of where we fit in, and where most of the products that I talked about fit in as well. So unfortunately, there's no sky hooks up there. I wish there were, and maybe I don't because I wouldn't have a job. But you know, ultimately, to make communications happen, you got to get the height. And so my role here at Alliance is to provide the assistance to our account managers, to our customers, to ensure that we select the best tower for their application and the most cost-effective tower for their application with the widest range of products available, and making sure, one thing that I always make sure as a professional engineer, that we're not going to get caught short, that the tower is going to be fully applicable for the application, and that the customer is going to be happy with the installer. We're members of NATE, as I indicated earlier. Personally, I'm on the NATE WIN teams, which is Wireless Industry Networking Association. I represent Canada on that. And I'm also heavily involved in STAC, which is the Canadian equivalent in many respects to NATE, which stands for Structured Tower and Antenna Council, doing a lot in the area like NATE to support safety. So anybody on the line here, you're involved in communications, if you're involved in the United States, I highly encourage you to join NATE. If you're in Canada, to join a STAC. And if you do work in both Canada and the United States, you should definitely be a member of both of these organizations to ensure that you get the latest and most information associated with products and safety in the marketplace. Now that's the end of my presentation, and in talking so much and so fast, I haven't really had a chance to look at the questions coming in. So
yeah,
Chris,
we got a few here, Jerry. So let's start with this one. Can the welded tower be nested?
Okay, different welded towers get nested differently. So if we're looking at the all-weld Trylon tower, it gets nested, but every fifth section. So that means it's not as well nested as the Titan Tower, which every odd and even section gets nested, which is way tighter of a nest than every fifth section. So most well towers, this is the trade-offs that happen. If you design for performance and initial build costs, or you design for freight. So in many cases, you're better off from a freight point of view stick building a knockdown tower than getting an all-well tower that you could install faster, but the nesting becomes the issue.
Okay. So what would you recommend for a 20 to 50 foot non-pen roof mount solution?
Okay, on that, I would say, get back to me. My email address is there. Tell me what you're looking at to put on that roof. The elevation of the roof is really important, the location, the wind, that's important. So if you could send me an email at jbezner@alliancecorporation.ca, as seen on the screen there, I'll get back to you with a recommendation. And also, only where you're located and how many you're looking at from a freight point of view.
Okay. Last question here. Sorry, two more questions. So Super Titan, is that a brand or the type of the tower?
That's a brand. The Super Titan is a brand from Trylon. It's similar in design with the LDA from Sabre and the RLS from Rohn. Trylon was the first to come out with that particular design, and they led the way with that particular product. So it is a brand of a Trylon tower. Any others, Chris?
Yeah, last question here. What is the best way to erect a self-supporting tower, section by section, or assemble from the ground first and then erect as a whole?
Usually when I get questions about erection, I always start by saying, always look for a professional installation crew. In the United States, contact Nate for people in your area. In Canada, Stack to get recommendations. It really depends on the terrain and the capability of the people. A lot of people will assemble the tower in 10-foot sections, put maybe 2, 3, 4 sections together, and then hoist that up with a crane versus having people stick build the tower. But, I've been involved with people building towers of close to 500 feet, and you can't get a crane easily up to that. So at the end, you got to stick build the tower. So it really depends on where you are and the expertise associated with it.
Okay. Some more questions came in here. Are all the accessories pen approved with drawings? All
the companies that I've talked about have designed their accessories that go on the tower to design to the engineering performance characteristics. So usually if you look in a catalog, you'll see light duty, say mount, medium duty, heavy duty, and you have to go back to that particular company and say, what do you mean by that? Or vice versa. If you really want to get a set of stamped drawings, you could do that, but usually companies charge more for that as well. It's not normally provided as part of the accessories, but is available from all the companies, from Comscope Steel, Sabre, Rohn as well. But there's a cost with that.
Yeah. What's your take with the use of helical piles with 120-foot Super Titan towers?
Super Titan towers out west in Canada have been installed on piles of various kinds, and really, you got to get a geotechnical engineer to look at the soils and what's required. And I'm not in a position to comment completely on that.
Do the stock towers have capacity for multiple carriers designed for co-location?
Usually not, but even when you look at the Super Titan Max, I generally say that those towers are anything but a carrier tower. So you definitely could put on some of the stock towers and Sabre and Rohn some carrier applications, but if you're looking at a multi-carrier tower, I would say no, you got to start looking at a custom design tower.
Okay. All right. That seems to be all the questions for now. If you have any more questions, please reach out to Jerry personally. So, yeah. So great stuff, Jerry. Thank you for sharing your tower.
Okay, thanks everybody for joining in. I'm really impressed. We had up to 50 people join in, and right to the end, we're at 48. So I appreciate everybody's attention, and please don't hesitate. You have my email address, and if you want me to call you to discuss something, please send me an email, and I'll get back to you as well. Thank you very much for your participation.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.